The market just rejected its biggest concern from last week because the one group of stocks that could have been under pressure today just flat out wasn't. The memory stocks, not only did they hold, they led the group. They blazed the trail today in the market. They drove the action. And when we see that, when that happens, it's usually not because the market changed its mind. It's because the market realized it had something wrong. So the real question today is, what did it figure out? And why is money or capital already moving back into these stocks so quickly? We're going to take a look at the action we saw today overall. As we head towards the closing bell, you can clearly see that Seagate Technology drove the way today. Seagate was up over $24, getting close to closing today at $4.53 a share, up over 5.5%. SanDisk right behind them. Great day as well. $23 gain almost on the day, up over 3% and closing in on over $724 a share. And then not far behind, guys, is Micron Technology, almost an $11.50 gain today, up over 3%. Micron is pushing towards that $3.80 a share again. Guys, this was a strong day on the market for the memory stocks. It is what I thought. You remember at the end of last week, I mentioned I thought Micron would have a bullish day today. I thought memory would have a bullish day overall. So it was great to see capital rotate back into those names. It was great to see that despite all of the escalation we felt over the weekend, because it wasn't a broad rally today overall. The NASDAQ was up. It was up about 0.5%. And we did see the semiconductor ETF, the VanEck ETF, was up just over a little bit of 0.5% the last time I looked at it as well. So it wasn't a broad rally across tech overall. Memory drove the day today. Seagate, as I mentioned, up over 5.5%. Micron over 3%. Western Digital and SanDisk both up over 3% last time I looked, in that 2.5% to 3% range. So money didn't just come back into tech. It directly came into the memory trade today. It directly came into the storage players today. And more importantly, it went to the specific names inside that group. We saw again, it wasn't just a full rotation. We saw some leaders in that group as well. And Seagate was clearly the leader today overall. So when we continue to see that type of divergence, that's not passive buying. That's intentional positioning within the group. So let's take a look at Seagate. Let's see why they drove. What was the signal for them today overall that drove their performance? And it was a clear signal, guys. There was a clear sign from Morgan Stanley that came out earlier today that raised the price target for Seagate to $582. But more importantly, if you scroll down, they mentioned that it is becoming their number one pick. You can see the analyst comment here. Our latest checks on HDD demand continues to strengthen, with our supply demand tracker now implying shortages through current year 2028. So the price per terabit is also significantly stronger than we thought, driving up our margins and earnings per share even further above consensus. They're raising the rating and making Seagate their number one pick overall. So that was a huge catalyst, not only for Seagate, but that was a catalyst we saw for HDD or the storage players today overall. When Morgan Stanley comes out and raises their price target to $582, as I mentioned, and making it their top pick, that said something that I think that people haven't appreciated yet. They're calling for demand to improve. Demand is accelerating, like we have talked about on the channel. They're saying there is an imbalance in storage that could last out until 2029. That's a completely different conversation than we've seen over the last few weeks. That is not a cycle. That is a structural storage narrative that is happening in the market. And that matters because Seagate is moving on that hype right now. It's moving on the idea that AI-driven data growth is not just increasing. It's outpacing the system's ability to store it right now. And that's why Seagate led the action today overall, not because it's cheap, not because HDDs are cheap, but because it's the cleanest way to express the imbalance we've seen in the market, the imbalance we're seeing in data centers. HDD, as we mentioned before, those drives are necessary for the data lakes that we see in the data centers. They're inexpensive compared to the other advanced memory, but they are so critically important. And Seagate is driving on that action. Western Digital as well was picking up on that action. Now, if we look at Micron, Micron, I think, is where the market told you something even more important, because Micron didn't lead the action today, but it also didn't break. And that matters for a stock like Micron, because the bearish narrative that we've seen over the last few weeks, I've seen particularly over the last week, that was very clear on the narrative that was being pushed on Micron, saying that memory prices are peaking, supply may be catching up, and that margins are compressing. But today, what did we see? We also saw a key analyst group come out. Let me show you that. It was KeyBank, came out earlier today, and you can clearly see, if I scroll up to the top, the KeyBank increases estimates for Micron. And if I scroll down here, KeyBank analysts reiterate an overweight rating, a $600 price target on Micron. And the reason is twofold. One is there are indicators that long-term agreements being put in place with hyperscalers are being negotiated with a pricing floor. So guys, we are concerned about price dropping. Micron is doing a really smart thing right now in their long-term contracts. They are locking in pricing floors overall to guarantee them. And there's also an upfront payments for capacity addressing the shortcomings with past long-term agreements. So overall, what KeyBank is saying is that this should provide limited downside risk and should support the continued re-rating of the stock. The second factor that drove their price target move was the increases that they're seeing in DRAM and NAND. So they're expecting the increase to be somewhere between 30 and 50% overall. So that was a clear catalyst today from Micron as well. That was a huge move for them to see DRAM and NAND pricing to move 30 to 50% higher in Q2. 30 to 50%, guys. That's not stabilization. That's acceleration. That's what we've been talking about, how demand is accelerating overall. So what the market did today was, what the market did with Micron today was subtle, but important for that stock. It didn't chase like Seagate. We didn't see it fly out of the gate like Seagate, but it also didn't sell. It held. It pushed itself higher even. $11 gain today. Great move, pushing up towards $3.80 a share. It tells you that the market is not ready to abandon the pricing upside story yet for Micron, the pricing upside story really for memory overall. And here's the piece that I think most people missed in today's action. And this is where the whole picture comes together for us as investors. Western Digital and SanDisk were both up as well, but they didn't lead. And that's exactly what you want to see when the move is real. Western Digital moved with Seagate, but with less conviction. It tells you that the market agrees that the storage demand, they agree in the storage demand story, but it's prioritizing the cleanest exposure. And that cleanest exposure right now is Seagate, based on what the analysts are saying. SanDisk also didn't have a major catalyst today at all, really, but it moved higher. It continued to grow, and that's not news-driven. That's not a news-driven sentiment for that stock. That's positioning overall. So when you line up when you line all four up, you get a very clear structure from today's action. Seagate had the strongest conviction overall. There was a storage imbalance clear. There was a strong conviction and a reason for that stock to move. Micron supported the price intact, being the price intact, pricing staying intact, supported the move overall for Micron today, what we saw. Plus those long-term agreements that are locking in pricing floors was a big move, a big bullish sign for Micron. Western Digital is participating today. They're joining that movement, what we saw with Seagate, what the analysts mentioned around Seagate and the demand for HDD. So they participated as a secondary exposure. And then we see SanDisk. It's just confirming demand across the group. We know the NAND story. It's picking up a little bit of that pricing movement, the pricing demand that KeyBank put out there for DRAM and NAND, that also. So you see a bit of secondary exposure as well for SanDisk there. That's not random when you see the group line up like that. That's a coherent flow of capital today. And it was great to see that bullish move in the memory cycle overall. Now, when you layer on the backdrop that we still have today with oil is still elevated, geopolitical risk is still in the system. We know we have a deadline at 8 p.m. tomorrow for Iran to make agreement on the Strait, or according to the Trump administration, they will suffer consequences. So the broader market wasn't exactly ripping today. And yet money still rotated into these names, these memory players. And that's not what you see in a fragile trade. That's not a weak trade. Like we've said yesterday, memory right now is not acting like a weak trade at all. It is starting to find its legs again. I think it's getting ready to take off and run again like we saw prior to Operation Epic Fury. And that's what we as investors need to see or starting to see is the reposition and not just a reaction. We're starting to see strength despite everything that's going around these stocks in the macro environment. So honestly, today, guys, was a great day for the group. It was a great confirmation day overall for the group. It's what we wanted to see, them continuing to move. We had great movement towards the end of last week. It's great to see that confirmation coming into today's trading action, despite all of the noise going on around these stocks. So after everything we talked about last week, these stocks didn't just hold, they actually showed real strength, real conviction in the market today, and that matters because it tells you there's real demand out there for the memory stocks. Going into tomorrow, I'm just watching to see if that continues. Do we continue to see this signal of strength? Do they keep getting bought at the level we saw today? Does Seagate continue to lead the group? Does Micron stay strong? Does that take over the lead? Because if they do, then this just confirms what we've been saying on the channel all last week and prior to Operation Epic Fury, that the memory super cycle is real. It's still intact, and it looks like we may have some bullish days ahead. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the action today. Let me know your comments below. Look forward to seeing you soon. Take care, everybody.